So I think you're all familiar with what we do this evening. To open a conversation regarding subjects of interest to you in your meditation practice or your understanding of the Dharma in general. So that means the ball's in your court. Since we all grew up playing tennis.
I just have a
Pat, yeah.
curiosity question about once we move to the new building, will the schedule for practice stay the same, or is there going to be any changes to that?
That's a good question.
Have you thought about it?
I'm sure everybody's had the thought, but
the question has zoomed around in my head a few times.
This would be a great place to take a poll.
Yeah.
We used to have decades ago, we had one session on Sunday. The reason we have started doing morning and evening was because we couldn't fit at one time. Now, my sense is that some people prefer to come in the evening. And so, if we were going to do one, we would only do the morning because we're old.
What was the last thing you said, Doris?
I said because we're old.
Oh, because we're old.
We're going to do it
Speak for
once.
yourself.
Well, what's ironic is I thought, we used to just do the morning, but actually, we started out doing the evening. Sunday
Did we?
evening, didn't we?
Long ago.
I do not have a clear
That was
recollection.
Lama Kinley was evening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lama Kinley. Yeah.
Did
Mama
Sunday
Tinley did
evenings
evening?
and
Yeah, we did
Tuesday
Sunday evening.
evenings and Wednesday
That was a
evenings.
long time.
We did Saturday mornings.
And then we added, I don't know. And anyway, was it always Sunday morning when you came?
I think so.
He doesn't remember that
Yeah, or
part.
I remember when we split it into two,
But
and that was pretty
pretty early.
early.
Yeah.
But I can't remember where it
So-
started.
Probably like in the so a couple years after Michael got here, or maybe a year or two. So
Yeah.
probably like 95 or 94 or something, we probably started doing
Yeah, 95 at the latest,
two.
I think.
Yeah, maybe more like.
Now,
But-
we're proving that we're old
So-
people because we're talking about stuff that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
But, so we've been doing it that long, so should we keep doing Sunday evenings?
Question is, are those the good old days?
So what do you think?
I don't know.
No, I'm
Yeah.
asking them.
Yeah, good.
Do you want to do a show of hands?
It's important because, as we have discovered many times, once you do something 3 times, it's over. It just sticks. That's where you end up. And then 20 years later, you say, was that a good decision or not? So it's more important than what it seems on the surface. It would appear that you could make the decision over and over, but it isn't actually what happens.
So what if we only had Sunday mornings? How many people would come Sunday morning?
6?
The
6?
graders.
How many people would not come if it was only Sunday morning?
Highly likely.
3 or 4?
Less often.
Less often, yeah, I probably don't know.
Is that
Alright.
because you
So-
guys stay up late on Saturday night, so you can't get up in the morning?
Judging.
I'm not judging, I'm
Takes a while to
just
get here
thinking
sometimes.
people like
Put a
to have a
moral
night
spin
and
on it.
they don't have to.
So what was that,
hurry up and go to
I
bed.
didn't connect the two. What is it that we're saying, not as
I
many
was-
people would come in the morning,
I was saying, who.
which has always been the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, who would just really not come in the morning?
Yeah,
And what if
What's
it were
my
10,
second?
what if it were 10 o'clock start?
Here we go. That's
If you did 10 till noon, I think you'd get a very
Yeah,
morning.
10 is better.
1 hour makes a big difference.
what? 7 in the morning is
Okay,
better?
yeah, would that- what difference would that make?
Who said
If
seven?
it was 10 in the
10 in
morning
the
instead
morning.
of 9,
I would come to either, but
Would that make a
would that
difference?
make a difference?
the people that wouldn't come.
I mean, for me, it's
with 10,
kids.
would you come?
That's your
This is, I've got one evening a week that my wife and I have a deal, and I take care of the kids all day, and then she needs me this evening. So, I mean, that's.
And which evening is that?
What's it?
This evening.
Oh,
Tonight's the grand bargain.
Tonight's your night.
I see.
It's his party night.
Yeah, this is my party night. I come and drink shot, and I sit around. It's also this is my party night.
But that's a good point, because the worst thing is to make it impossible for somebody to come.
Yeah.
'Cause the other side of it is, how do you make it possible for the most to come more often? But
I think if you stop either of those two, you would inevitably lose a few people that would never come in.
of course, yeah.
So,
And the only way to beat that is to have 2 sessions,
yeah.
I think. They don't have to be on the same day though, also, right?
True.
Could be.
Saturday evening, Sunday morning?
It's hard to consider things we're not used to. There's a certain-
Saturday morning, Sunday evening.
Yeah, exactly. Either one.
I think it's gotta be Saturday morning, Sunday evening.
You sort of have to
Saturday
plan it
morning?
out.
How many people
Saturday-
would come Saturday morning?
Saturday
John.
is not a good day. John's
Good,
way
I get a
down.
one-on-one
The only one.
I would come on Saturday morning.
Yeah, I could do that.
I mean, I'm just saying, as opposed to Saturday night when usually there's
Oh.
symphony, ballet, or whatever, you name it.
Oh, I see,
rock
yeah.
Oh,
concert,
yeah, no,
salsa.
Saturday night, I think no one would, everybody probably
That's-
would have other plans, you know.
I think it's best to stick with the same schedule. I can't imagine coming on a Saturday unless it was a party.
Well, if we really want to talk about the good old days and what the schedule used to be.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday,
Yeah.
Friday,
It
and
was,
Saturday, and Sunday.
Monday morning at 6 a.m. was Medicine Buddha. Let's see, Monday evening was,
Well, it doesn't matter, there were
Right.
like 6 or 7
Sessions,
sessions
A
every
week?
week.
yeah.
And some were early morning, and some were in
Yeah.
And that's
the
not,
weekend, and
that's
some were.
including classes, right?
Nope.
No,
No,
No.
just the
No.
regular
no,
practice
just
session.
practice. And, yeah, so, and they were all different practices mostly. And, or there was maybe more like 8 or 9 sessions, I guess.
I think there were, yeah. But in any case, it was a lot.
so
And
one
that
of the-
included a couple of times at 6 in the morning.
And one of the principles when we changed
Monday,
it,
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday evenings.
Can't imagine there was many people here.
no, there
No,
weren't.
there's-
And that's, so when we changed it, one of the principles was that if we have fewer, then people will really gather and get together and, you know, make a point of coming, whereas if you kind of have it all the time, then people just kind of, you know, you don't have the same group energy.
But there are some things that it always depends on resources and availability, but some people have expressed interest in having a sit every morning at 6 a.m. You know, the early morning sit, that kind of concept, whether it's exactly 6 or not, but that's one of the things that people have mentioned.
I know, they have a 7 a.m. set at the Shambhala Center, and I think, you know, they don't have a teacher there, they just have somebody acts as the Unze, and I think that's pretty well attended.
Like
They're
every
not
day,
mobs, but
like every weekday.
every weekday.
There's some centers I looked into that only have stuff in the mornings on weekends.
So how many people would find a morning sit an interesting thing?
Every day you're talking about.
Yeah, a weekday morning sit. 2 people?
Always think through it.
I think it'd be good to do green tar in the morning. Like on a Saturday morning,
Maybe.
I might come to that.
That's
Maybe
when
it'd
we
be
used to do green tar.
Yeah, but late morning,
I'd be curious.
10 or 11.
I'd be curious about the value or importance of group session versus private session. 'Cause I mean, every morning, every night, we do our private stuff.
Yeah.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
what's the value add of the group session? I'm just curious. Maybe we can talk about that.
Oh, there's a question for you, Michael. What's the difference between different value between sitting in a group and practicing on your own?
Well, practicing in a group supports the Sangha in general, of course. So it's often nice in the sense many Dharma centers, if you live in the Dharma center, then there's a requirement to go to the meditation sessions. And of course, the sessions are always more than what you want to go to, but you go to them anyway. And then there's some value to that, because you end up doing more meditation than you otherwise would, and you recognize that benefit, right? But inherently, I think, aside from the value of kind of this cementing, the bonding in the group, as a group of Dharma brothers and sisters doing their practice together, beyond that, then I'm not really sure what it is. So the benefit of supporting people in their practice by bringing them all together seems important. Whether you do it in the morning or you do it at, whatever you do, it's like there's something. We have a community because we have a time and we all come, and the same people don't always come to every session and all, but when you look at the total number of people, there's a lot of people go through here on a weekend. And most people, I actually can't remember a time when somebody didn't say, it's really nice to come and practice with so many people. I see people that then I know people that I didn't know before, and so many benefits from that. But there isn't anything that can't be subdued by other forces. So even we can avoid personal meditation by going to the group meditations, but there's something then that you miss by not doing your own personal meditation. And if you only do the personal meditation, for any given person at any given time, that could become a way to avoid meditating with other people. So it's hard to balance all these things and say that there's some benefit to one thing that's not there for the other. I don't know.
It's an interesting, the fact that the tradition in the 3-year retreat is to have all your practice on your own in your room, except for
Except for those that aren't.
couple hours, a couple hours in the morning or less, a little bit less.
You mean personal in your room?
No, what are the group
The group
times?
sessions.
Oh, the group
There's
practices are a
morning
couple
and
of times a day, and an hour and a half to 2 hours each.
So that kind of says what the
I'm not sure
thinks.
I'm not sure what you're about to say is correct.
I already said it. a reflection of some kind of valuing by the lineage. That's my impression. That it says you ought to, there's this
Value in
need to,
group.
there's need to do these group things, and there's need to do the bulk of it on your own. So,
I think a case could be made for that. I'm not sure that I would say that because we have also an enormous traditional value placed upon someone who does a lot of practice by themselves. You know, like Milarepa, and you could name another dozen famous people who have done that. I think the 3-year retreat is in a certain way not a good example because it's really designed for the 3-year retreat. So it doesn't, I've never heard this, so maybe it's one way or the other. But what I do think is true is that we're going to end up doing the same thing we did before, in the sense that we will all evaluate how things are going and whether or not that works, just like we did when we said, should we have a second session in the day? That was not an easy decision because it disrupted lives and schedules and all sorts of things. And some people said, well, we should do it in the morning, in the evening, and so on. And then once you do it, it's difficult to change it, because one of the values of, for example, doing the all-day sit once a month was we didn't have to advertise it anymore. We're going to have an all-day sit, you know, and then everybody's getting geared up. Well, people can't get geared up every week. So so you say every week we're going to do it, and then what happens is many more people come to that all-day sit than they otherwise would, because they just know it's scheduled. And I think that in a just to kind of make the case, just in order to make the case, not because it's true, that there's a certain way that things are likely to just naturally evolve once we move to the other location, and that's the point at which we have to be careful, like from now until then, because we're going to end up making decisions that we don't want to be a precedent yet, but they will become precedent yet. And that's just what it is. So that's why I think it's a really good idea. Like Dora said, this is a good place to take a poll. Probably every time we meet is a good place to take a poll, and then making something even more detailed about it to try and catch everybody's input on it. And then, of course, we'll end up moving, and then we'll find out whether or not that was the truth or whether it was something else. It's the nature of the transition, I think. If it was next door, it would be an issue. The fact that it's a little ways away and you can't walk to it, and it's still a 10-minute drive, is that about right? Once you know exactly where it's going.
is it Bill? 10, 12?
Huh?
Bill knows.
It's
Right.
13 minutes.
Yeah, blindfolded.
In morning traffic.
That's if you live here.
Yeah, that's if you live here.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because there's others that live over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should recognize the enthusiasm for 10 o'clock. Let's not lose that.
Now, we need to test the veracity of that,
We're
Phil,
gonna have-
by asking you, are you enthusiastic about it?
Yeah, I like it. I like the idea. Yeah. Yeah, it gives me some more options in the morning, which my wife would appreciate.
To have it, wait, to
We
have
do
it later?
breakfast, yeah. if it's
No.
Yeah,
later.
to have it 10 instead of
At
9.
10 instead of 9.
And then we have a lot of people in the morning who would say they like it early, because then they, you know,
Yeah.
They've got
they're
the rest
people
of
are
the
just
day.
still in bed, you know, and then they go home and start the day with their kids.
Well, what we might find, because we're still a small sangha and we'll be in a big church, is that if you have 2 sessions, you're going to have a small amount of people in a big area, where if you had one, you'd fill it up more. But I guess that's an experiment to find out.
Yeah.
I know in my case, I don't have a car, so I have to bike everywhere. 49th and where?
Skidmore.
Skidmore is considerably farther. So for me, I wouldn't be able to get to morning ones nearly as often.
Yeah.
Because I was able to get up out of bed, walk my dog, and get here in 10 minutes. And that in that case, I'd be like, okay, I gotta like it's a half-hour bike ride, so I better plan. So
That's very good to hear. Very good point.
It will be the KCC bus, of course. The shuttle bus.
Which John just volunteered to buy and drive.
For all the people who show up here and then they get on the bus to come there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I listen to it. I'm also drawn to 10 o'clock because I always do my practice literally when I first wake up. That's it. I don't even get out of bed. I sit up, I pull some things together, and I sit there and I do the practice then. That's my foundation practice piece. And then sometimes on a weekend, if I don't have anything to do, then I can stay there longer or have some breakfast and do some more. 9 o'clock is sometimes more difficult depending on what happened the day before, you know. But you can carry that too far also, like, well, let's start at noon, you know.
Excuse me.
Life closes in on you from all directions, so.
I mean, not on a frat Sunday. It's any day, like in the mornings. It's just like getting to work is still difficult. So and that's a half-hour bike ride for me. So I don't know. I'm a minority though, because I know this that when I get here, there's a few bikes and there's a bike tonight, but usually there's not. So I am definitely a minority.
We could work out carpooling too. I mean, I'd be happy to pick you up for one day.
I'll also be in Philadelphia, so.
That's out of the question then.
It's a long bike ride.
Yeah.
Are you moving there
You
permanently?
didn't tell us that.
I was throwing.
Oh.
But your
You're being the
example
devil's
of,
advocate.
you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
your example is repeated with other
Yeah, it
people.
is.
It's not-
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just as an example of something that may not have been thought of.
I've often looked out there and had the sense that many people come on bikes, but also then when you look, there aren't very many bikes.
Yeah.
But I think that's partly because the people who are on bikes may decide more often not to come. That's just my guess. They're more likely to decide not to come because maybe they're the ones that are further away and there's other things, encumbrances, not so easy to deal with from a biking standpoint as opposed to a car.
There's no bike rack here, is there?
No,
We
There's
just
a
stick them in the
fence.
back
I just fence thing.
Fence.
or on the fence.
That's a pretty easy fix if we had.
Well, we could,
No.
I have a question, kind of regarding this. So what's the benefit of practicing early?
Vaccine
Not-
early?
And not like right when you get up, because I understand that kind of dream state to meditation state, but the actual act of so early, people get up at 4, 6 a.m. meditation. That seems insane to me.
Why
What's
did you eliminate the early sleep states? What was that caveat about?
Well, I understand like the difference between when you wake up,
Yeah.
whatever time of day that is,
Yeah,
that state between, you're just sort of kind of groggy,
waking and sleeping, yeah.
waking
yeah.
to getting to, from the sleep state to meditation.
Yeah.
I get the benefit of that.
Yeah.
But that's a little different of a question than the benefit of getting up early, driving somewhere,
Yep.
and practicing.
Yeah. So
So what's the benefit of that?
what's the benefit of which now?
Just getting up early?
Oh, just getting up early?
No, yeah, just,
From a meditation
yeah,
standpoint,
yeah,
right?
like practicing with people or without.
Well, I think actually, I mean, I can slightly tongue-in-cheek say, well, because it's an old Tibetan or Buddhist tradition, everybody gets up early to do it. That's how you know you're a Buddhist. But actually, I think there's a lot more around the issue of waking up in a certain way, in a way which easily transitions to a meditation state. But of course, it's totally true. You can wake up at noon and do that. You can wake up at 7 in the morning and do it. However, there's other things that are natural environmental supports for that process, like the sun rising and set. The truth is, we can't always harness that support because we don't move around on the basis of when the sun rises and sets. We move around on the basis of how fast the hand turns on the clock. And so on any given morning, it may be like noon outside at 6 o'clock in the morning. So that rationale only partially works, but it's still the case that, and occasionally we do teach that process of like how to wake up with that and the things you can do to encourage it. And it is, in my own experience, it's a very powerful adjunct to meditation to use the falling asleep and waking states as points in the day and night. But that's not fixed by the clock. If it's fixed by the clock, then we're in trouble for the reasons we just stated. It's helpful if you do that during sunrise and sunset, not because there's necessarily something magic about sunrise and sunset, but when that was the clock, that worked pretty good. It just isn't our clock now, so we could do it at any time. I don't have a particular preference with it. Did you want more on that? Were you asking?
I just always wonder if it's kind of going to shift with generations, or
Is what?
I just know a lot of people who aren't morning people.
Who are not morning people. Yeah.
And and it's actually hard. It would be really hard for me to get here at 9:30 in the morning. It would be impossible for me to get here at 6 a.m. I mean, I could probably pull it off a couple times a year.
Yeah.
What
If
about
I was
when
on
you're
retreat,
yeah, when you're on
different.
retreat?
That's
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah, on retreat is different.
It is different.
Of course, the point of retreat is to set a schedule and a habit that one would follow after the retreat, but I get your point. Yeah.
One of
I don't know.
the most common things that's said about meditating in the morning is that we have a day that unfolds after that.
Yeah.
So if we just do some practice before we get too far launched in our
Right.
habits, then we have something that might actually have a little residual value
Yeah.
as the day unfolds. I mean, that's the intention, one of the intentions of it.
But if you wake up at noon and you practice at noon and then you start your
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
it works.
Theoretically,
Theoretically.
it could happen at any time.
Yeah.
In practice, of course, when we have a schedule like Bill and I and anybody else who's teaching, then we have to be here at a certain time. And a fair number of times we might decide like, I think I'll sleep in. But you can't do it, so you get up. So that we lose that the later in the day that we start. An added encouragement for doing the meditation before 1 o'clock rolls around. But that's only like an added support. The support is meant to help us sit down and do our meditation. And I think it works and doesn't work depending on who you are and what your schedule is. So I think there's an argument to be made for 10 o'clock. I I don't know that, I just think there's an argument to be made for it. It'd be interesting, I suspect it would be compelling for us if we were over at the Skidmore place and we followed the schedule that we have here, and we found that probably in the very beginning, it'd probably be more people than what we have now, and then gradually it would settle into approximately what we get now. And then it would be interesting to see if we ran that and then said, we're going to do it at 10. First, we'd lose more people who don't like the change, and so they would stop by. But I wonder if after a couple of months, it might actually double somehow by virtue of the later times. Just
What if you had it open at 9, so if people wanted to come at 9, but, they could just start sitting?
yeah.
Yeah.
But like the real thing started at 10, so you didn't have to feel like you were late if you came at 10.
That's a good idea.
I think that's nice in any case.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about that here, but that's a resource issue too. Somebody has to be here, somebody has to, it's better if somebody isn't just here, but that there's people who have also said they'll go there and sit, so that if somebody's coming, they're not coming wondering whether they're the only one there.
Yeah.
As a number of things, and then you run out of
It could even
people.
be just Sangha members who would volunteer to be the Unze, so that the teachers wouldn't
Yes.
have to arrive until 10.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. you guys deserve some perks. Come on.
I've been reading a lot of the Lankavatara Sutra, and it's kind of been I've been totally switching gears. But I was thinking a lot because the Buddha talks a lot about the discriminating mind in it. And like in different lineages, or all of the lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, you're trying to somewhat get to a place where everything is of one taste. And I kind of see that as like a similar similarity in terms, like the Lankavatara Sutra, saying everything is one taste.
So it's similar to what?
In the Lankavatara Sutra, the Buddha talks a lot about the discriminating mind, and about how it is essentially, in so many words, the unwise mind, or the ignorant mind, in a
Yeah.
sense, and the not enlightened mind. And so I'm basically wondering what are good practices, or what are good ways to try to get closer to that place.
To the discriminating mind?
Oh no, wait,
The
I'm discriminating.
The one taste.
Yes, the one taste.
The one taste. Yeah, first you need to do the discriminating mind.
Yep.
The discrimination that we're talking about is the ability to make decisions, choices, if you will, between what is helpful for you and others and what is not helpful. So a one taste is quite a ways past that. The learning to discriminate between our desires and our aversions and all of these things in a way that leads us to make decisions that we're happy about, that aren't filled with regret, and that we feel comfortable with, and that we feel we benefit from. Because if you don't feel like you benefit from something, you don't want to repeat it, just naturally. So learning to discriminate can be done by following for example, the 6 paramitas. Like, you take those as a practice for some years and do those really carefully, then you discover something about what it's like to just discriminate. And at a certain point, then the discrimination becomes unintentional. Like, you don't have to intend to do something. It just becomes natural.
So it just kind of becomes right action through practice.
Yeah, that's another way. You can do it that way. And gradually then it leads to the place you're you're talking about, though not in any rational way. One taste is not a rational
Yeah.
realization. So, whereas the six paramitas lend themselves easily to understanding. You know, if you're trying to not lie, the place that you start is kind of a gross level of lie. And the more you practice that, the more you see that actually lying takes place rather continuously in ways that even we don't see. So then the more we can see how we kind of trick and cheat ourselves out of things that previously we couldn't see, then we begin to see them, and that's good thing. So gradually that unfolds also. One taste is just like, you know, if you had a 12-inch ruler, one taste would be just kind of like a half an inch down from enlightenment. It's right on the edge.
Yeah. If you think about just our ordinary, just to use the metaphor, to extend the metaphor, when we think about taste, what do we generally think about?
Food.
Food.
Yeah, and
Or
what's the
taste of
basic?
air
Is it?
or water?
Does it taste good or does it taste bad?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Tastes good, tastes bad. I like the way this tastes. I don't like the way that tastes.
yeah.
So that's where we start. But underneath that, there's the more fundamental thing of what are we? We depend on a sense of well-being from avoiding that which tastes bad and getting more of what tastes good. And that's the paradigm. That dependency is the thing that actually that has to dissolve. That sense of dependency on tastes good, tastes bad, avoid, get. Depending on that, that actually is what dissolves. So it's very we can get, I think, too fancy about thinking about states, like the experience of one taste being a state, and we should get to this state. But at a more fundamental level, just the whole process of gradually seeing through the way that we are trapped by our dependency on conditions, our demands on the world, our wish to control things. And that's leaning into that and discovering that is very accessible through the six paramitas and through calm abiding practice. You could say all of the practices actually help with that. So,
How we're doing?
That's it.
truly not depending on circumstances, not being trapped by circumstances, that is the end of the ruler.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't know that we ever addressed your thing. Did we?
Sort of.
Sort of.
What was left over?
It's kind of a C minus, right?
It's okay, it's not a big,
Does-
deep question. I was just kind of curious.
It was
So what's left over
yeah.
Well, I don't know if we got to a yes or no
on
the benefits of early
just
I see.
early morning?
Yeah.
meditation.
But not in group necessarily, or did you want to keep it focused on
So
group?
early morning, regardless of whether you're a morning person or not.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
And
can I add a point on that? I've discovered that the 6 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., there's a stillness. There's not, except the garbage trucks that show up at 6, but generally there's a nice stillness and you can fold right into that stillness so quickly. Versus when by the time I get to 7, then all the energy starting to pick up in the city. And you can hear all that energy. It gets, all of a sudden,
Yeah,
suddenly
sure.
you get a lot of distractions to
That's a
deal
good
with.
point.
So that's just, to me, an advantage of the early.
It's not just you, all of these things, I think we all have these things. I think the exploration is really valuable. Like, what is benefit? If we all knew that the only way to get the benefit was to get up at 6, we'd say, we're gonna get up at 6, because there isn't anything else.
Yeah.
That's it. And we also all know that if you got up at 6 every day for a month, getting up at 6 would be the obvious thing. You don't even have to try, it just happens. How is it I can read your lips?
She is a dedicated late riser. Wait, there's also that silence late at night, too.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, the real yardstick here that really counts beyond everything else is what gets you on the cushion.
Yeah.
No matter how good 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. are, if that didn't get you on the cushion, it's a useless standard. So I think that the rub here is that that's impossible for us to actually investigate closely. But we can ask the question, if more people were on the cushion at 10 a.m., would we do it? If more were on it at another time, would that be a better time to have it? So I think that's really that's the real baseline. How do you get on the cushion and do it? Sometimes when you're on the cushion and you have reasonable experience and you feel like your insight into things is beginning to deepen, you're happy to make certain kinds of sacrifices that seemed unreasonable before. So these are all things I think that are worth looking at. We can't explore it completely here tonight, or even in our first week or so or month at the new center. But I think it's worth putting them all on the table and asking the question, what do we get for it? I mean, I would project that more people would come at 10 than at 9. If that was the only standard, if that was the only thing, that I think it would be kind of easy to make a thing. I'm just not sure that that's the only measuring stick. Huh?
Why wouldn't it be?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know, actually. So I'm not objecting to the 10 o'clock thing. I'm just...
Why didn't you do it here at 10?
We had the preponderance of the people who talked about it was that they liked the idea of kind of having more day afterwards. Yeah. Getting that, you know,
Get it over with, right?
Again, it was about their family or anybody else who they wanted to connect with, that they could do that afterwards, and it didn't take away from
Yeah.
their other people.
Yeah. I think if you're the person who gets up at 6 a.m. anyway, 10 a.m. really feels like an enormous
Well, the day.
burden and inconvenience.
Yeah.
You got half your day going, and then you have to stop in the middle. And
Yeah, you stop in the middle, you're all kind of wound up, and now you're doing your meditation, which also feels a little wound up, and then you start your day again.
Around here, there were so many churches too, and they all do start later. So in some ways, you know, you get the parking and you get earlier.
Oh, you do?
You get into the restaurants earlier. And,
Yeah.
But I don't think we have that competition over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
this may seem all very kind of mundane, but there is a way in which what we are doing actually is creating the container for the practice for the community.
Yeah.
So It's not not kind of a minor thing. It's not
Yeah.
a minor thing.
I guess I might be interested in why, or what are the reasons for considering changing the schedule, you know, to kind of have those in sight. Because the schedule, you know, the way that it is, it kind of rolls. It's been rolling for a while, you know, and people are used to it. So I'm thinking there must be some reasons why we're looking at wanting to change that. You know? I mean, I really like the idea of 10 o'clock too, and people can leave at 11 if they want to, get on with their day earlier, and they'd still have that meditation. But I guess I'm just wondering, you know, what do we throw up in the air, you know, and why, as we're making the change. You know, it's like taking a deck of cards and throw it up in the air, you see where it falls, you know, and you have to kind of kind of organize and all of that.
Yeah.
And you know, there are reasons to do that, you know, that I wonder if,
Well, we're imagining now, throwing it up in the air and imagining where it falls. and at some point, it's going to actually have its day in court, you might say.
I mean, there's two different reasons for thinking about it at the same time. One is when you're making a change, it's an opportunity to make a change, more change, you know, sort of everybody.
More change.
Like Pat asked, why did she ask the question? Oh, is anything going to change? She thinks something might change because we're moving to it, you know. So it is an opportunity mentally.
Yep.
But the other reason is, is there something about the difference? Like I mentioned, we have 2 sessions on Sunday originally because we couldn't fit in here. Now we can fit. So that reason went away. Should we, you know,
Yeah.
that's a
But
reason.
I guess, is that the reason why people are here?
Hmm.
Because we couldn't fit in the morning.
It's not the reason.
Yeah,
not the
and
reason.
of course
It's not the
now
reason.
it's evolved
Yeah.
to something else, so
Yeah.
that isn't true. But we could also say maybe, well, if it's 10 minutes further now for more people,
I think a lot of people it's going
even
to be
driving
further for,
and even
yeah.
more, a lot farther for walking,
Yeah.
then that's, could be a reason to start later. You know, so I guess, so the place, the different location, the different size could be a reason to think about changing. We weren't really thinking about that much.
Well, you know, I mean, I think you could kind of get the best of both worlds. Like, okay, these sessions at the Shambhala Center, there's just people who like to get up early who come and volunteer to be the Umze at 7 a.m. on the week, every weekday. So say we had people that that were early people, wanted to start at 9. One of them could be an Umze, and the teachers could come at 10. You know, and so if you wanted to come at 10, you haven't missed anything. If
Yeah.
you wanted to come at 9, you got an extra hour of meditation.
After everyone was really awake, we could come.
Yeah. Well, you know, and if the teachings were at 10, then if you had gotten there at 9 and you wanted to leave at 11, you could. Or if you got there at 10, stay longer, whatever, you know. I mean, it seems like you'd be casting a wider net of people that would decide not to come because it was too early or too late. Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what's your opinion, Stephanie? Put it on the line.
It's easier for me to come in the evening.
Easier to come in the evening.
Yeah.
So 10 o'clock doesn't
10,
affect
10
you.
o'clock is more enticing than 9, for sure. Yeah.
Not, 10 o'clock is. Is that what you said?
More preferable than 9, yeah.
Barely.
But would you actually come?
Well, get that kids program going. I'll be there.
Yeah.
We're looking for a commitment here, you know.
I will try to come either way.
Yeah. It's interesting.
All we have to do is get an espresso machine, and then we'll get people coming in the morning.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Volunteer to.
I like that idea a lot.
We need a volunteer barista. Did you
Yeah.
make that announcement earlier?
Yeah.
Steve's got a pretty nice one, you could just walk over to her.
Espresso included until 9:30, and then
That would get him in the door.
$5 starting at 10.
Well, I like the idea of trying to entice more people to come, because I can't imagine how, if we have this many people in that big space, it's gonna be like, you know.
Well, we hope that more people will come, otherwise we wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. I think they will. If you build it, they will come, you know.
That's the underlying operating principle is really, it's true.
And on that note,
There's the question of when we begin, and then there's also the question of when we end.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Actually, when Cynthia laid out the cushion